This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's Motor Week. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss. If you'd like to talk about anything that deals with automobiles or something with an engine in it, because all engines work pretty much the same, well, give us a call. I'd love to talk to you. Anything at all dealing with cars or items with engines in them. So by all means, I'd like to talk to you. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like drivers are getting crazier by the minute. And the other day, I was on a 4-lane interstate with very fast traffic when some idiot in the far left lane apparently didn't realize his exit was coming up and shot across all 4 lanes to make the exit. Horns blowing, tires screeching, and a couple of very near misses. The guy must have the brain of an amoeba and the luck of a saint, because if the driver of the 18-wheeler he cut off hadn't been ultra quick, he would have been mashed into a bloody pile of goo. Then there are the seriously demented drivers who aren't content with just one dangerous antic, so they weave in and out of lanes. Hey, there were even a few people who used their turn signals. Ooh, isn't that unique? Unfortunately, most of those were only signaling to show you that you were on their private piece of highway. You know them. They're arrogant, ignorant asses who feel they own a piece of the highway, and it doesn't matter that you're using it. They're going to take it, and you had damn well better get out of their way. And let's not forget the tailgaters, idiots looming large in your rearview mirror, 2 feet off your rear bumper with no way on earth to stop in an emergency. Well, hey, actually they can stop, because when they hit the back of your car, it does tend to slow them down. Idiots abound on today's roads, so here's an important safety tip. Special order your next new car instead of buying one from inventory, and it's possible you could get a much safer car without adding a single penny to its cost. It's easy. Just go through the list of options and pick the ones you want, then add a free option to your list. Turn signals. That's right, turn signals. Oh, you didn't know turn signals were optional on new cars? Well, they must be, because so many drivers don't signal their turns, and that, my friends, makes 0 sense, because not using signals is stupid and dangerous. The only rational conclusion is their cars don't have turn signals. So simple, so basic to driving, yet lots of lives are lost each year because people don't use turn signals. Perhaps it's just to move stupidity up to an art form, or who the hell knows. Turn signals have been on cars for over 75 years. The first blinking turn signals were on 1939 Buicks. The next year they were standard on several cars and available for about $8 on many more. Now, all this begs the question, after more than 3/4 of a century, why do so many people refuse to use turn signals? Do they get a rush from cheating death? Are they just really bad drivers? Or maybe there are way too many incredibly stupid drivers on our highways? I don't know, nor do I understand the craziness, but I do know it's extremely dangerous. Bottom line, to live longer, practice being a better driver. That's it, folks. Be a better driver. You know, there are so many mistakes that we see every time we go out on the highway, people cutting you off, doing all of these crazy things. Some of it certainly is just a mistake. But then you've got the aggressive drivers, the tailgaters. Tailgaters in particular I don't know if you tailgate or you don't, but one thing to keep in mind if you do tailgate is that, do you know how your brakes compare to the car that is ahead of you, the car that you are tailgating? You see, in many cases, you may be driving a garden variety car, and the car ahead of you may have a high-performance brake option or better tires than you do or something like that. So the interesting part of all of this is that without knowing that you can stop quicker than the car ahead of you, well, you have to leave more space so that any difference in stopping distances and reaction time and things like that, that you're going to be able to avoid hitting the car in front of you. Now, reaction time is a big part of that. From the time that you apply the brakes, there is a reaction of 1 to 2 seconds, reaction time of 1 to 2 seconds before you hit the brakes. So in that distance, consider that you're doing 60 miles an hour. At 60 miles an hour, you're traveling 88 feet per second. Now, granted, the car ahead of you who has hit the brakes, they're still moving forward, but they're not moving forward at 88 feet per second. So your reaction time, let's say you're really quick and it's 1 second, your reaction time means that you move forward 88 feet before you ever hit the brake pedal. 88 feet at 60 miles an hour. Now, think about that. The average car is 15 feet long or thereabouts. So you're going to go past 2 or 3 cars, or you're going to go over them, or you're going to plow into them, or whatever. So use a little common sense and think about what you're doing. Think about the reality of how all of this works. There are physics, there are laws of physics that determine how you should be driving. And one of them is that you should be allowing enough room between you and the car ahead of you that your reaction time is taken care of, and that the difference in stopping distance, because the car ahead of you may have better brakes than you and have better tires and so on, that difference in stopping distance is also accounted for. I know that my saying this isn't going to change anybody's mind about anything, but goodness gracious, folks, you know, take it easy out there, and you know, it's dangerous on the highway. All right, one other thing to keep in mind. We see lots of cars coming in where they've been to certain shops that love to upsell brake jobs. Now, what they do is they may sell you different pads, they may sell you bigger rotors or slotted rotors or cross-dewelled rotors or something like that. Now, will that help your stopping distances? No. It will not. Bigger brakes will not help your stopping distances. Now, why and how can that possibly be? We put better brakes on the car and it won't stop better? No. Take your car out, pull the fuse out of the ABS. Now, apply the brakes. Get up to whatever speed, apply the brakes hard like in a panic stop. At whatever speed the wheels lose, or the tires lose traction, that is the speed or the amount of stopping power that you have, period, dot. You see, it isn't the brakes that control how quickly the car stops, it's the tires. Putting bigger brakes on without changing the tires and getting more rubber on the road means that the tires are going to lose traction, and when you lose traction, you don't have any braking. So the tires are going to lose traction at the same rate of deceleration no matter how big the brakes are. You know, it could be a situation where you have 12-inch brake rotors. If you put 20-inch brake rotors on it and your tires lose traction at 60 miles an hour, then with those 20-inch rotors, your tires are going to lose traction at 60 miles an hour. Same thing. That is just the way it works. So you have to upgrade the tires and so on. Now, granted, if you're going to the racetrack or you're towing and going down a lot of hills and so on, bigger brakes may make the pedal last longer before it starts sinking to the floor, called brake fade. But that is not going to happen in normal driving. So the fact of the matter is that these big brake kits, without changing tires, don't really do much. So it's just one of the things that you need to be aware of. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Lots of rainy weather can lead to car air conditioner mold problems. Now, if your basement is damp, it won't be long before you start seeing mold. And although mold is common in car air conditioners, just like in your basement, it has to be removed. You see, damp air conditioners, like damp basements, provide a wonderfully inviting place for mold to thrive. If you had a moldy basement, you wouldn't ignore it, yet nearly everyone ignores mold in their cars. But in a car, you're up close and personal with it, and nearly every breath you take in a moldy car has passed over the nasty stuff. A sure sign of mold growing inside your car's air conditioner is a foul smell when the AC first starts blowing. There are products to spray into the air conditioner that deal with odor, but most do not get rid of the mold. Why worry? Well, mold reduces AC performance, but more important, the air you breathe in the car is moving over nasty, moldy stuff that can cause respiratory and allergic problems. So if you're experiencing unusual allergy symptoms or eye irritation, you may have a mold-contaminated car air conditioner. The fix requires a commercial-strength product like BG FrigiClean, professionally injected directly into the vehicle's AC ducts to kill, then remove the mold and make the system clean and fresh. Life changes at a ferocious pace these days, especially when it comes to maintaining our cars. For example, automatic transmissions now need regular fluid flushes. Transmission fluid breaks down with use, and although it may look fine, its additives wear out and it can no longer properly protect bands, clutches, seals, and other hugely expensive parts inside your transmission. Bottom line, more wear and a shorter transmission life. Now you can significantly extend transmission life with a BG transmission flush every 24 to 30,000 miles or 2 years. BG makes the best transmission flush machine I've ever tested. It renews all of the fluid in your transmission, not just a small part of it. The BG transmission flush machine is safe too, because it uses the natural circulation of the transmission. Your transmission will work better and last longer. As with everything BG offers, this is a superior service. For more information, go to bgprod.com or bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
All right, for those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on tunein.com, please note our new show time every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. Now, we will repeat this show at 1 so that those of you who like to listen to it at that time can. Just keep in mind that at 1 o'clock you will not be able to call in. here at 9. Well, you can call in and call me names and do all that good stuff. Here is a question. Back in the day, many high-performance cars had very lumpy idles. Many of them would almost stall out at traffic lights. Today's high-performance cars don't seem to have that issue, however, and I'm not really sure why. I've always thought that the real cause was valve overlap, which could possibly be avoided on overhead cam engines, but Camaros and Corvettes have overhead valve engines and don't really seem to have any idle issues. Can you please educate me on this? Well, sure. It's just modern technology. Back in the day, in a high-performance engine, it was designed to go like stink at high RPM. So the camshafts in them were designed to work properly at very high RPM, which that was fine. Everything worked as it should, except an engine needs a different cam profile and different cam timing and so on to have a smooth idle. So you had it one way or the other. You had a smooth idle and not much on the upper end, or you had this high performance engine that was really good on in the upper RPM range, but it idled like garbage. All right. Why don't modern cars do that? Well, real simple. Today we have variable valve timing. And in some cases we even have variable valve lift. So what that means is that at idle, the camshafts can work like a low performance engine. But then as you accelerate, as you bring the engine RPM up, the profile or the cam timing or both changes so that you have something that is set up for high performance. Well, in the past that couldn't happen. Today it can, and that's how they do it. They simply change how the camshaft or camshafts in the engine work, and it's all controlled by oil pressure and things like that, the computer and so on, which is also why you don't want to change away from the oil that is recommended for your car, because the oil that is recommended is also the oil that is going to keep this variable valve timing, this change in valve timing, working the way it should. Thicker oil, which all of you seem to want for some reason. I don't know why. Do not understand it. But anyway, you put the thicker oil in it, it changes oil pressure, and now the valve timing may change too early or change too much, and the next thing you know, you've got a check engine light, and you've got codes, and oh, it just goes on and on and on. So that's why I always recommend that you use the oil that the engine was designed to use, not something that somebody thinks is better. So anyway, lastly, this is still on the question, how do VW and Audi get 258 pound-feet of torque, almost as much as a V6 Mustang, out of a tiny 2-liter engine at only 1,500 RPM? Again, it comes down to computers and turbos. You can turbocharge, and the 2-liter VW engine is a turbo motor. You can turbocharge it, and you can control it with a computer that is going to keep the turbo working the way you want it to work at low RPM. And because it's forced induction, what happens is that you force more air into the engine, and then you can add more fuel, because what it takes to make horsepower and torque is more fuel. So, in order to burn more fuel, you've got to get more air into the engine, and that's where turbocharging and supercharging comes in. In order to burn more fuel, you have to have more air, and a turbo will push more air into the engine. So will a supercharger. That allows the computer to add more fuel. Adding more fuel gives you more horsepower and torque, and that, in turn, we calibrate it so that it happens at a low RPM, and the computer controls all of this. We get amazing performance out of these teeny tiny little engines these days, 1.5s, 1.8s, 2-liter, things like that. Really, really amazing performance. So just something that you ought to keep in mind. And remember, there is only one way to make more power, and that's to burn more fuel. So whenever anybody tells you that, oh yeah, we can give you more power and we can give you better fuel economy and we can do both of them at the same time, nope, ain't going to happen, folks. You do not get more power and better fuel economy at the same time, because it takes more fuel to make more power, period, dot, end of issue. We're going to take a break.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
When buying a car, most drivers look for more power, but they rarely consider two even more important performance factors. Just buying horsepower doesn't guarantee a great feeling or great performing car. More important are power to weight ratio and torque. Power to weight ratio has a huge effect on how a car performs. The more power you have relative to the weight of the vehicle, the better it will perform. High-performance cars are usually very light with big engines, so they have a high power-to-weight ratio. A high-performance engine in a lightweight sports car makes it go like stink, but put the same engine into a giant 18-wheeler, and it would be lucky to even move the big beast. Turn that around and put the semi-engine in the sports car, and it would literally tear the car apart. So, there are limits to all of this. Within the class of car you're looking at, you want a high power to weight ratio, not just high horsepower. In some cases, a better power to weight ratio will also mean better fuel economy because the engine doesn't have to work as hard to move the car. Also consider torque, which is the twisting force needed to get the car moving. More torque makes the car feel better during acceleration. Also, the lower the RPM where the highest torque number occurs, the stronger the car will feel. Just thought you might like to know. I get lots of questions about BG products, many about specific products or services like, is BG44K really that good, or are BG transmission, cooling system, and power steering flushes actually necessary? But most popular of all, do I use BG products in my cars? Well, the answer to all of those questions is yes. A regular schedule of BG flushes and chemicals will deliver the longest possible life from all the lubricated and fuel delivery parts on your vehicles. And do I use BG products? You bet I do. I drive nice cars, and I drive a lot. Plus, my live radio and TV shows mean that my cars have to be absolutely reliable. A no start from dirty fuel injectors or a failed transmission just isn't acceptable in my life. Remember, deposits and dirty fluids ruin expensive parts. For reliability like I demand, visit one of the quality shops that sell BG products and perform BG services. To find a BG professional near you, bgfindashop.com.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
All right, folks, this portion of Goss's Garage is brought to you by BG Products. And yes, I do sell them, and yes, I do use them in my cars. All right, here we have a rather long email. This one, let's see. Who is it from? Well, I don't know. I guess it's Bill. My 94 Taurus wagon with a Jasper replacement 3.8 V6 is experiencing an erratic stumble at idle and has a lot of trouble accelerating up hills and seems to have a miss at highway speeds. I first cleaned the throttle body and the IAC motor, but that didn't help much. I then tried in-tank fuel injector cleaners. They only seemed to make the problem worse, and the car began stalling when coming to a stop. I then took it to a local garage that was reputable. However, that garage had changed ownership and ended up taking me for $111 to do nothing but change the fuel filter, a job I could have done myself and saved the hour's worth of labor charges. Yeah, well, there's an old saying that you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. So I think you got a bad case of fleas and may need a flea collar here. My suspicion is either my fuel pump is clogged or dying. What in the hell is a clogged fuel pump? Never heard of that one. Dying, maybe. Or my fuel injectors are badly dirty. No check engine light is displayed. I don't have a fuel pressure gauge or anything to test the electrical connections on the injectors. I'm nervous about having the injectors serviced on the car, as I've heard that can cause them to leak. Oh my goodness. Service on the car cause fuel injectors to leak. Not really. Not if it's done right. What you need is a good shop. And that good shop, they may suggest cleaning the fuel injectors. What they're going to do is they're going to look at the data stream. You've got all this information coming to you. The shop that worked on has all this information sitting there in the data stream from the computer. Yet, they're going to fiddle around with fuel filters and stuff like that. Look at the data stream, see what it's missing. It's got to be missing fuel or air or spark. So how do you tell that from a data stream? Well, first you look at things like the mass airflow sensor reading. What is the reading of the mass airflow sensor? Is it where it should be? How many grams per second at idle? This is a Ford. It has a lot of problems. Fords have problems, especially older ones like this, had huge problems with mass airflow sensors. I can't imagine why anybody would take this car through the doors of a professional shop and not look at the data stream, and especially not look at the air measurement from the mass airflow sensors, telling the car how much air is coming into the engine. Now, why would it only happen at idle? Well, you say that it's hard to accelerate and so on as well, but lots of times these sensors will not be linear. In other words, they're supposed to deliver X amount of air or X amount of fuel at an airflow of, let's say, 50 grams per second. And then that should be double that at 100 grams per second. But instead of 100 or double that, what you wind up with is nonlinear, so that as the numbers for one go up, the numbers for the second, for the fuel, don't track with it, and it may only go up 20% or something like that. Now you have too much air, not enough fuel, you have a lean fuel mixture, you've got a screwed up idle, you've got poor acceleration, and so on. So the technician should be looking at the data stream, and they're going to be looking at things like short-term and long-term fuel trim, and a whole bunch of stuff like that, but especially fuel trim. That'll tell you if you have a fuel issue, because you don't know at this point whether it is even fuel or ignition. You know, could be ignition, could be a weak ignition coil, could be. You have to do some testing, and obviously the shop that you took it doesn't have a clue, so you need to find a good shop, one that knows what they're doing and knows how to actually test a car, not just how to replace parts on a car. So there's a big difference between replacing parts and hoping that they work and testing to see what's wrong, then installing the failed part and retesting to see the problem gone. And that's the way you do it in a good shop. You test to find the problem. You replace the part that has failed. You retest to verify that the problem is gone. Test, repair, retest. Test, repair, retest. Just like that. So I would be expecting on this Taurus, a bad mass airflow sensor, maybe a bad coolant sensor, possibly an inlet air temperature sensor, or things like bad fuel injectors, dirty fuel injectors, and so on, a weak coil, a lot of different possibilities here. But the data stream will help eliminate those one by one. We'll take a break. Goss's Garage. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
This is the story of two cheap caps on your car that can cause big problems. Radiator caps and gas caps. Both should be replaced every couple years. Now, that may seem extreme, but a failed radiator cap can let air leak into the cooling system, which causes the car to overheat. Air can also cause serious cooling system rust buildup. But don't think of it as just rust. Think of it as what it really is: dissolved engine. It's that simple. Rust is the remnants of dissolved metal parts inside the engine that have mixed with the coolant. An $8 radiator cap could save you hundreds or even thousands over time. Another cap that has acquired star status is the gas cap. In the past, gas caps normally lasted the life of the car. The only time anyone bought a new one was when they drove off with the cap laying on the car's roof or the gas pump. But today, gas caps provide an airtight seal to prevent gas fumes from leaking out of the tank. Gas fumes add significantly to air pollution, so the government mandated that gas caps had to keep fumes in the car. When your gas cap gets tired, it allows fumes to leak, and on comes the dreaded check engine light. So, before buying expensive check engine light testing, always test the gas cap, or it may be easier just to replace it. Cheap and simple solutions to what are often costly problems. Life changes at a ferocious pace these days, especially when it comes to maintaining our cars. For example, automatic transmissions now need regular fluid flushes. Transmission fluid breaks down with use, and although it may look fine, its additives wear out and it can no longer properly protect bands, clutches, seals, and other hugely expensive parts inside your transmission. Bottom line, more wear and a shorter transmission life. Now you can significantly extend transmission life with a BG transmission flush every 24 to 30,000 miles or 2 years. BG makes the best transmission flush machine I've ever tested. It renews all of the fluid in your transmission, not just a small part of it. The BG transmission flush machine is safe too, because it uses the natural circulation of the transmission. Your transmission will work better and last longer. As with everything BG offers, this is a superior service. For more information, go to bgprod.com or bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Hey folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. And for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right. Lots of controversy on later cars, newer cars, about direct fuel injection. Direct injection. Now, what exactly is direct injection? Well, if you were to look at a cylinder or look at an engine, in the past, the fuel for the fuel injectors were positioned on top of the intake valves. They were in one of the runners for the intake manifold, and the injector would sit right behind the intake valve. When the valve opened, it would squirt fuel into the cylinder over the intake valve. All right, well, direct injection works considerably differently. Instead of injecting the fuel onto the back of the intake valve, the low pressure area there, the direct injection uses a high pressure pump that's mounted onto the engine. And that high pressure pump pressurizes the fuel on the backs of the fuel injectors into the many thousands of pounds per square inch. Now, in this case, the injector is mounted above the piston, right straight into the cylinder, directly into the cylinder. That's why it's called direct injection. It doesn't pass over the intake valves or anything like that. All right, so it uses high pressure to inject fuel into the pressurized cylinder. So the cylinder comes up on the compression stroke. There's air in that cylinder. It compresses the air. As it compresses the air heats up. That heat, though there's also a spark plug involved here, unlike a diesel, the heat is not enough to ignite the fuel, but it does help in the way the fuel burns. So we've got this hot air inside the cylinder. It's compressed. Then we shoot the fuel into the cylinder, and the fuel is highly atomized. We give it a spark at the same time, or roughly the same time, and the fuel ignites with the oxygen in the air, and it burns, and as it burns, it expands and pushes the piston down. Well, the big thing here that a lot of people complain about is that the intake valves on their cars over time get gummed up with deposits because there's no fuel with detergent or anything in it being sprayed across them. And that may be true. Big thing is that most of the contamination that gets onto the backs of the intake valves comes from the crankcase breather system. You know, in the crankcase, you've got fumes that are oily in nature. Those have to be drawn out. So the crankcase breather system, we used to call them PCVs, the crankcase breather system pulls these fumes out of the crankcase and back into the air stream coming into the engine. All right, so now we've got oily air coming into the intake. And that oily air passes over the backs of the intake valves. And as it does, some of the oil leaches out of the air. The oil, in turn, forms deposits, minuscule deposits, on the backs of the intake valves. But over tens of thousands of miles, those minuscule deposits build up. just like in a cave, a stalactite or a stalagmite, stalagmite. Over millions of years, the cumulative effect of one drop at a time with one molecule of deposit, over time it builds up. And the same thing happens on the intake valves of a modern direct injected engine. How can you eliminate it? Well, I don't know that you can 100% eliminate it, but you can certainly reduce it by using a catch can on the crankcase breather system. We've talked about these before. What they do is they go into that crankcase breather line, and they are an oil separator. So any air that comes through it has to pass through a device that causes the oil to drop out, and the oil drops into the bottom of the catch can. And you periodically drain the catch can, and that prevents most of this oil from going back into the engine and contaminating the intake valves. The other thing, of course, is there are ways to inject various cleaners. We use the BG induction system here, cleaner here in the shop, and that means that we have a special device that we can inject a cleaner into the intake so that the cleaner passes over the valves and cleans them. Now, be wary of this, because in some shops they're going to tell you that the only way to do this is to disassemble the engine. Well, hey, so that's the way we go about it, and in many cases a couple $100 as opposed to a couple $1,000. Now, what are some of the things that go wrong with direct injection? Well, one of the biggest things that destroys the high-pressure fuel pump, and like I say, it's mounted to the engine, it's driven off of a camshaft, and it is lubricated with oil. Poor maintenance. Poor maintenance. Don't change the oil, wear out the high-pressure pump. Spend $1,700 or $18 or $19 or whatever the pump might be. So as this happens, what goes on is that you don't change the oil frequently enough, and this high-pressure pump rides on a camshaft, and the oil gets dirty. The oil is abrasive from the dirt, and the part of the fuel pump that rides on that camshaft, because the camshaft, every time the high spot on the camshaft moves past that portion of the fuel pump, it pushes it upward. So it just does a thing kind of like this, pushes the arm up, and that activates the fuel pump. Well, over time, that arm on the fuel pump will wear, and then what happens is that it doesn't move far enough, and your fuel pressure goes down, and that means you don't get proper amounts of fuel into each cylinder, or that the pressure is too low, or you know, it just leads to poor performance, and ultimately a car that won't run when it gets bad enough. Before that, you'll probably get a check engine light and several other things that just, you know, they'll cost you money and drive you crazy. All right, we need to take another break. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
You probably don't think about it, but if you double the life of your car, your fixed expenses per mile will drop 50%. But how can you double the life of a car? Well, that's easy. Simply use BG products and flushes for your routine maintenance. I'll bet you know someone whose cars last a lot longer than yours, plus they never seem to have problems. Now you can enjoy those great savings too. Simply enroll in the BG Protection Plan, and BG will guarantee covered parts for as long as you own your car, in writing. With the BG Protection Plan, long after your car is paid off, you'll still have years of warranty left. Think about it. No payments and no worries about major repair bills. That's amazing. It's almost too good to be true because the BG Protection Plan is also absolutely free. My cars are covered by the BG Protection Plan. Yours should be too. For details, bgprod.com or 800-327-8883. Don't fall victim to "it looks good, therefore it must be good." Like when thump bump you're tapped by another car at a traffic light or in a parking lot. You get out and look, and being a good person, yeah, right. You just don't want the hassle of calling the cops and your insurance company. Plus, you don't even see a scratch, so you let it go. That could be a minor to deadly mistake. What you see is purely cosmetic, but hidden behind the cosmetics are safety systems. Those hidden parts absorb and dissipate energy, and they may have been damaged in that tiny bump. The problem is that unless you have energy absorbers and crumple zones checked, they may not protect you if your car is hit again in the same spot. Most safety parts are one-time use, and that first minor bump may have used up a portion of their effectiveness. Then, in an actual accident, they're only partially effective. For instance, the energy absorber may transmit more of the crash energy into the car and the people in the car. That could mean the difference between no or minor injuries or something worse, especially for young or elderly passengers. Even in bumps that seem like a total non-issue, take a minute to exchange information, then have the safety parts behind the bumper checked. It might save a life.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Okay, folks, for those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. We will repeat the show at 1 p.m. for those of you who like that time better. Just remember, at 9 you can call in, at 1 you cannot, because it is a repeat. All right, before we go back to direct injection, question from Bill, which is your favorite dry gas? We've talked about dry gas and using isopropyl and so on instead of methanol. You use isopropyl because it mixes with the water in your fuel tank. Then it causes the water and the alcohol and the gasoline to co-bond together as the car moves. The rocking action as you go around corners and so on mixes all of this up, and the water is pulled out of the fuel system with the fuel, burned harmlessly in the engine, good to go. Which one do I like? I like BG because I sell BG. And it does a good job. The big thing is that you can use any brand of isopropyl dry gas, because what it is simply isopropyl alcohol without the water in it. Now, you can't use rubbing alcohol or anything like that, because if you look at it, it's 33% by volume water. Well, that means it's already saturated. It's reached its saturation point with water, so it isn't going to take any water out of your fuel system. You're just going to dump a couple bucks worth of alcohol into your tank, and it's not going to do anything at all for you. So if you could get pure isopropyl alcohol, then that's fine. You could use just regular medical grade isopropyl alcohol, but it can't have water in it, because that's why you're putting it in the tank is to have it grab that water in the tank, and if it already has water in it, already saturated with water, hey, it isn't going to grab any water in your tank. It's just going to go through and do nothing. Like I say, my favorite is BG, but any good brand, just watch out. Don't buy methanol-based dry gas, because it won't do you much good for anything at all. All right, so that's the story on dry gas. And you use dry gas once every month, winter and summer, no matter where you live. It has nothing to do with freezing or anything. Well, it might if you're in a really cold climate, but the big thing is water collects in fuel systems because of humidity in the air. So you've got humidity in the air as the tank breathes this humidity. The air with the moisture in it comes into the tank, and you know, it then condenses inside the tank, and over time it builds up and then causes problems with fuel injectors and other parts of the fuel system. And keep in mind, you'll have technicians and people in repair shops and so on telling you, oh, that couldn't happen, you got a sealed fuel system. Oh, really? Now, how, pray tell, does that work? You know, if you take a bottle of water, and let's say it's a really sturdy bottle, lock your lips around it really, really tightly so no air can get into that bottle. Now, suck on the bottle. Just pull on it as hard as you possibly can, and will you get a drop of water out of it? No, because nothing can come out of that bottle as long as it's sealed until we allow air to come in to replace what's being pulled out. Same thing with a fuel tank. As the fuel is used, the level goes down, the level is replaced with air. If it didn't, there isn't any pump in the universe that could pull fuel out of that tank. And if it could, what would happen in very short order is it would pull a vacuum inside the tank, and the tank would simply collapse on itself. So, you know, these people who tell you this stuff like sealed transmissions and sealed fuel systems and sealed brake systems and all this stuff, they don't exist, folks. That's not the way science works. Ay, 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 ay. Anyway, some of the things that can cause problems with direct fuel injection. Lack of maintenance. You know, everything on a car comes down to maintenance. If you want it to last a long time, be reliable, and all the rest of the good stuff, you have to take care of it. There is no such thing as an oil that lasts forever. There is no such thing as any fluid in a car that lasts forever. Now, I know you don't like to hear stuff like that, and you want to read the owner's manual, and it says up to 5 years or up to 10,000 miles or so on. Well, so many of you read that stuff as, well, this means I should change my oil at 10,000 miles. No, it doesn't. It means that absolutely under no circumstance, no matter what you do, how you do it, what you use, anything at all, never, ever go beyond that amount. It's not the recommended. It is the don't go beyond. It's like the sell by date that you see in the grocery store. You go in and you buy something that has a sell by date on it. That tells you when it's good, and you should use it before that time. That doesn't mean that you should keep it in the refrigerator until that time. So cars are the same way, and a lack of maintenance, because the way these high pressure pumps work, the camshaft and the follower for the pump riding on that camshaft, oh my goodness, huge amounts of pressure, because any pump like that has a spring inside it. The spring keeps the plunger or arm or whatever it is riding tightly against the camshaft so you don't get a ticking noise. And those springs have to be relatively heavy, so there's a lot of pressure on that arm, or maybe a little button like on a plunger or something. But whatever it is, it rides directly on the camshaft. A lot of pressure. Dirty oil wears it down. So you have got to keep the oil changed on a modern car. You cannot go for endless amounts of time with dirty oil and so on and not have it take a toll on the inside of your engine and parts relative to the engine, like the direct injection fuel pump, which runs and is lubricated on engine oil. So big deal these days. You know, you just can't let the oil go like you might have been able to do in an antique car that you know, had big tolerances inside, didn't have any sophisticated parts or anything like that. So always change the oil. You know, the ideal thing for most drivers, 5,000 to 6,000 miles. You know, changed it in my 17 Jeep had right at 6,000 miles on it.